Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest batch of listener questions. On this episode, we're asking where Mo Salah should go next. We're asking why Paris is such a soccer hotbed of talent. And we're asking about the dominant leagues in the world before the Premier League came to town. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, oh look, it's Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor. How are you?
It's me. I am well. I'm still here, and I'm excited for this one, even if the very first question sent me down a lengthy rabbit hole of historical research and historical clubs, and my head still hurts because of it.
If you're interested in joining us down that rabbit hole in a few minutes, listeners, stay tuned. Graham Ruthven's also here. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. I'm personally looking forward to the Leicester versus Spurs question, which incidentally might actually be a fixture in the Championship next season. So.
Woof. Digs. I like it, Graham. More of it, please.
Digs.
Joe
It's
Lowery,
normally
hello.
you. It's normally you with the Spurs digs. So I'm just filling a quota for the episode.
I'm not a Tottenham fan, so Graham's words didn't hurt me at all, so I'm doing great, Ryan. Thank you for asking. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm grand, thank you, on this day in which we are releasing this episode. Thank you very much for asking. I tell you what, do you know why I'm grand, Joe? Because I know on the horizon we have a World Cup this summer. And at the start of that World Cup, 4 of us are going to be in a room, also known as the El Rey Theatre, where we're going to do a live show. TSS presents the Total Soccer Show World Cup Live is coming to Los Angeles on June 11th, 8 p.m. Pacific, if you want to be specific, which I do when it comes to Pacific. If you would like to have a ticket to that, if you join our Patreon, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, there is a pre-sale link in there. It's going to go on general very shortly indeed. Is it going on general next week, Graham?
On Monday, yes, it'll go on general sale. So please do come and see us. It'd be great to pack out that room and wear your jerseys. And I think the last time we had a live show in New York, people had signs and kind of tifo-inspired things. So let's just make it as interesting and as colourful as we can, because the night before the USA's home opener, I think everyone's going to be buzzing. We'll have forgotten that defeat to the March defeats and the friendly defeats, and we'll all be buzzing for the start of the World Cup and for the US winning the whole thing, of course.
Of course. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show to get involved and get your ticket today, and also to get our bonus content, including a bonus listener question coming from a work of Bart this week, who's asking about set pieces. They get a bad rap these days. Thanks, Arsenal. But why should we give them a good rap? Let's find out in a work of Bart's question on the bonus feed. You'll also get access to our Discord server where... How many of the cool kids is it? All the cool kids are hanging out in our Discord server. Join us there. It's fun. It's a great way to support us. All right, let's get into our listener questions for this here episode, including this one from 26,000 Units of Beast. I still don't understand the name, but I like saying it. According to some, the Premier League is the pinnacle of modern soccer, with notable players moving to even mid-table teams in the league. What are some other examples of leagues being the pinnacle of soccer for their time, and how many are not considered one of the top 5 leagues today? I think, Taylor, immediately my mind jumps to the other league that was big in my lifetime, I would say, Serie A, which in the early 90s, pre-Premier League, I'd probably say, was very much the pinnacle. It was where every big player wanted to go, where every big player generally was as well. And certainly in England, growing up as a fan watching the game, pre-Premier League, where the game arguably wasn't in a great state in my home country. It very much felt very exotic, and you get a couple of players who were English going over there, and it'd be very exciting. And I suppose Italia 90 being the pinnacle for Italian soccer as well. It was very much the place to be. I'd probably still consider Italy a top 5 league to get to Units of Beast question, but that one I feel like is the previous empire before the Premier League.
Yep. And I think has the most parallels to, like, for the question being asked, because you have a lot of different clubs kind of vying for supremacy. And then at the same time, you have, with the ban on foreign player rules being lifted, ban on foreign players being lifted, there it is, in the early 80s, that's when you get that kind of flood of foreign talent coming in, which does kind of remind me of the Premier League, where you're able to bring in some of the biggest and best from other leagues to further strengthen you. You have competitive domestic campaigns. You have teams winning in Europe as well. So, yeah, I think, Ryan, that is a really good shout and probably the closest parallel, even if it is not outside of the big 5 at this point. But as I said, there's lots of other potential candidates, including, I think, maybe 2 that qualify for, like, outside of the top 5. Before we get to that one, I would say England from 76 to 82 is probably, again, another nominee. That's when they win 6 straight European Cups do English clubs, but you've got Liverpool. It's Liverpool, Forest, Liverpool, Villa. So 3 different English clubs winning the European Cup at the time. You have a really competitive league where those clubs are also kind of rotating who wins the title each year. Feels like you have just a ton of talent there that are also succeeding in Europe. So that feels like a good sort of chunk of time for English clubs. Germany and the Netherlands maybe also on the list, but I think a lot of that has to do with specific individual clubs, Ajax and then Bayern Munich. The other one that I wanted to kind of shout out that maybe fits some of the criteria as well, except for maybe the foreign players coming in, would be the Brazilian state leagues of the 1950s to the early 1970s. Basically, like basically every Brazil team, I think, that wins the World Cup in 58, 62, and 70 are all domestic-based. But you have Pelé and Carlos Alberto at Santos in 1970. Zito and Mauro Ramos were there in 1962. Garrincha at Botafogo. So you've got lots of different players that are still known today, but even like bigger names that I haven't mentioned, who are all playing for different Brazilian clubs. It's not just the one or the two. They're all kind of spread out. And so you have a lot of talent spread across that league, in a very competitive league at that, with them then doing their kind of global tours and going on to beat European and the rest of the world opposition. So maybe the Brazilian State League is another good example from a bygone era.
Graham, anything to add to that one? I was trying to think of whether Spain has ever had the pinnacle title.
So I think you'd maybe look at the 1950s when you had that great Real Madrid team that scooped up so many European Cups. And domestically in the early part of the 50s, it was actually Barcelona who had the generational team, and they won 5 trophies in one season. So there was a lot of strength in the Spanish league at that time. Then as you move into the 60s, you have the great Inter Milan team, and Italian football kind of really advanced the game in a tactical sense. You have the start of Catenaccio around then. A lot of the best players in the world at that time are Italian. Then I think in the 70s, the Bundesliga really comes to the fore, and you have Bayern Munich dominating the European Cup. There's also Gladbach at their peak. Around this time, you have players like Beckenbauer, Gerd Müller. Germany won the 74 World Cup. I think the Eredivisie was pretty strong around this time. Ajax won a bunch of European Cups. Feyenoord are also good at this time, so they maybe fit the bill as a non-Big Five league. And then into the 80s, I guess like the German clubs remained strong. Kevin Keegan joined Hamburg in what was like a record transfer. He was a Ballon d'Or winner. But then you start coming into that period that you were talking about, Ryan, with the Italian players. You have, Maradona and Platini and Zico, and that kind of lasts all the way up to like the late 90s. And in that period you have Arrigo Sacchi's great Milan team. Then laterally you have Zidane's Juventus team. And then as we move into the 21st century, the commercialisation of the Premier League starts to take hold. I guess like the Messi-Ronaldo era, for a time it was a bit of a debate of whether La Liga at that point, Ryan, to answer your initial question you led me in with, maybe that was the most recent time. Spain might have been the answer to the question of what's the best league in the world. But the market forces had kind of already started shifting towards the Premier League, and that's kind of where we're at now. And I don't really know if it will be the same sort of generation to generation shift that we've had over the decades, because it just feels like the wealth of the Premier League is so firmly entrenched now that it would take something major for that to change in the near future.
Yeah, I think it is fascinating, La Liga, in more recent times, how they sort of were on the cusp of becoming what the Premier League is now, or at least it felt like they had the chance to become something like it when Messi and Ronaldo were both playing in La Liga, and in the succession planning, which is sort of a weird way to talk about a league, but I think it is often how we talk about MLS and how they've tried to grow and become something more. Feels like La Liga had something to build off of and then just has not managed to actually build off of it. Now, there are disadvantages that I think teams in Spain have to teams in England. I think the language barrier from an international level is one of those things. Obviously, there are so many Spanish speakers in the world, but the U.S. is sort of an up-for-grabs soccer territory, right? And so if you can tilt the scales in your favor in that way, like the Premier League has done, I think there's a lot to be said for that. But Spain had something, and I'm honestly not sure if they're ever going to quite get back to where they were before in that way. I mean, Barcelona and Real Madrid are still absolutely incredible, but things are just different now than they were when Messi and Ronaldo were playing in that league. I think you guys have discussed this really well. I'm not sure that I found an example that I feel really good about of saying this league was in the absolute pinnacle. Like, they were clearly, indisputably, the best league in the world, and now they're outside the top 5. You can think about Hungary, you can think about the Soviet Union for a little bit. Taylor, you mentioned Brazil. I'm not sure, and I don't necessarily have the historical expertise here, but I'm not sure that any of those leagues were so obviously the best. I mean, they were influential in their own different ways, but really, the soccer powerhouses of today are sort of more or less the soccer powerhouses of yesterday.
Are you going to give us 3 or 4 minutes on the 1920s and 1930s Hungarian league structure, Joe? Or
let me go quick. Just reread my Inverting the Pyramid copy that I've read all of, and then I'll get back to you.
Honved were solid. I'm not gonna lie. But then Puskás leaves and goes to Real Madrid, and Real Madrid get really good. I think Joe is correct in his overall kind of summary of the situation, and I think that's also probably why the closest parallel to the current Premier League would be Serie A of like the late 80s and early 90s, because there is a bit more of the kind of like global audience than maybe you'd get like listening to news reports of Honved in the 1950s or Real Madrid in the 1950s. I think there is some sort of crossover in terms of the global appeal of the sport at the time.
Yeah, the league I'm about to mention was by no means ever the pinnacle, but the SPL in the late 90s, like the 98-99 season, as unbelievable as this may sound, Rangers had the third highest wage bill in the world as recently as 1999.
How'd that work out for them, Graham?
It worked out fine. They had no repercussions further down the line for that, but they had a higher wage bill than Manchester United, who won the treble that season. And when you look at their signings, Arthur Newman from PSV, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst from Feyenoord, Andrei Kanchelskis from Fiorentina. They had Colin Hendry, who was a Premier League winner from Blackburn Rovers. They signed Stefan Klos, who was the goalkeeper who just won the Champions League from Borussia Dortmund. They had the De Boer brothers they signed from Barcelona. I mean, yeah, it's no wonder they went bust. But there was a little bit of trickle down where you had Fabrizio Ravanelli, excuse me, the other Fabrizio, and Claudio Caniggia playing for Dundee in Scotland. They also went bust. So there was a time when Scottish clubs were able to attract genuinely top-level talent. Those days are long gone now. But I think they maybe deserve a bit of a mention in this question.
Ravanelli had quite a journey, didn't he? Which exotic locations would you like to play soccer in? Oh, Middlesbrough and Dundee, please. Yeah, I'll take it.
What a career.
What a career. 26,000 units of beast. Thank you very much indeed for your question. We're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, we've got that Leicester Spurs question that Graham teased a moment ago. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. JM Frankel has been in touch with this one. Using the TSS time machine to go back, what would be harder to convince you of? Telling someone before the 2015 season that Leicester City was about to win the Premier League, or going back before the 2024 season and telling someone that the next 2 years of Tottenham would include 2 relegation fights, 2 European campaigns, and a European trophy? Using the time machine instead of hindsight to ignore us knowing how good Jamie Vardy, N'Golo Conte and Riyad Mahrez would become, of course. Now, Joe, I am coded to side with the Leicester side of things here, them being the 5,000 to 1 winners of the Premier League. That just seems more unlikely than anything else. I mean, it's harder to win the Premier League than to get relegated, I would argue. So for me, that one is the harder storyline to convince. What say you?
I agree. Man, this is close, though. This is really, really close. And I tried to, listeners will not be surprised, to quantify this in some way. And so I used that 5,000 to 1 odds for Leicester, where that basically puts them at an implied percentage of 0.2% chance that the bookmakers gave them to win the title back in 2015. And then I looked at Tottenham's odds of being relegated just this season, right? And back before the season started, I saw an odds maker who had it at an implied percentage of 1.22%. So that is not the full scope of the question, because it's only one season rather than 2. But my thinking about this, and the reason why I am swayed by Leicester at the end of the day, is that really, if you go and tell me, like past Joe, Tottenham are going to have 2 seasons where they're threatened with relegation, the second season isn't going to sway me all that much. Because the first season, if I believe you that they're already going to get relegated or be close to it in the first season, and they somehow survive, they're probably going to be pretty bad the next season too, right? That is generally how these relegation-threatened teams work. So really, I only need to know in this time machine situation that Tottenham are almost going to get relegated once. And if I can believe that, I can believe that it could happen twice, which then sways me all the way back to Leicester. So the second season for Tottenham, which in my head should make it more unlikely, really I think in reality doesn't make it that much more unlikely. So I'm going with Leicester as still the ultimate modern improbable sport event. And I think Tottenham come close, but they don't do enough for me.
Taylor, shaking your head slightly there.
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I think where it would change is if they were to be relegated, Tottenham. Because I still don't really think they will be, mostly just because it's Tottenham. Like they're too big of a club to go down, and I don't know if that logic really applies anymore, but I still kind of can't get my head around it. Similar
Is
to
that,
I think
sorry, Taylor. Is that the first time it's Tottenham has been used in a positive sense? I think that might be the only time.
Lads,
in
it's
history.
Tottenham. They can't get relegated.
But positively, It's
Also, too big to fail has never been a phrase that's.
No, Newcastle
gone wrong.
definitely didn't say that before they went down to the
Sorry, Taylor.
Championship.
I
I'm not
derailed you,
saying-
but I thought that was
I'm
funny.
not saying it's logical. I'm not saying I even agree with it. I'm just saying that, like, right now, it's still like relegation fights. Of course, sometimes clubs are in quote unquote relegation battles, and then they're not really. Like, that's not that surprising. But if it were Tottenham would win the Europa League and then also be relegated like a season later, I would say that's ridiculous. That's definitely not going to happen. Similar to how I probably would have said that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen to Leicester winning the Premier League, which is still the most improbable, most shocking result over the course of a season I can remember. So I think it's Leicester by some distance, unless Spurs actually were to be relegated. Then it tightens up pretty quickly, that race.
Yeah. Graham, any further thoughts on that?
No, I think Leicester is probably the answer. Although Spurs going down would be the biggest Premier League shock since Leicester winning the title. I mean, I think the important part of the question is actually the latter part. Is like you have to ignore what we now know about N'Golo Kante and Riyad Mahrez and even Jamie Vardy. I mean, Jamie Vardy we knew was like a decent Premier League level striker, but we didn't think he would go on to become an iconic Premier League striker in the way that he did. And we had no idea who Riyad Mahrez and N'Golo Kante were. And Leicester went into that season, the 15-16 season, having sacked their manager heading into that year because of a Thai orgy involving his son, Nigel Adkins. So, like, it couldn't have been any more chaotic. I won't go any more into that story,
Graham,
but
don't you
that's
love
what
those
happened.
moments when you bring something up and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have brought that up. As you're bringing it up, I could hear you doubt yourself and be like, oh no, what have I done?
It's important to note how Leicester got there, and the orgy is part of that story. So yeah, and then Claudio Ranieri comes in, and he obviously had a reputation and had been iconic previously, but everyone thought he was yesterday's man. Like, nobody felt that was a kind of shrewd appointment. Nobody expected anything from Leicester that season. They expected a relegation battle. So yeah, I think Leicester is still the answer. Also, while kind of factoring in how the nature of the Premier League now, I do kind of wonder if we might see more big teams, maybe not next season, maybe not the season after that, but in the years to come, flirting with the relegation zone just because of the wealth in the bottom half of the table and how those teams can compete a little bit more. I mean, Manchester United last season finished 15th. They were never in a relegation battle, but I never thought I'd see Manchester United finish as low as that in a Premier League table. So it feels like we're more likely to see a Spurs story in the future than another Leicester City story.
There you go. J.M. Frankel, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, J.M. Frankel, for your question. We go now to Trent McGivers, who says, where should Mo Salah play next year? I assume he'll want a Champions League club, not a Saudi or an MLS one. If so, which one makes the most sense? Now, Graham, whether he wants a Champions League club is different to whether he's going to get one, I suppose, in theory. He's still, obviously, a very, very, very talented player. But what do we think? Where do we think he's going to end up?
So I'd like to see him in MLS, just to cut straight to the chase. There was a deep dive by The Athletic last week on how it all ended for Salah at Liverpool. I'd recommend that article. I think that's what The Athletic does best, apart from this podcast, of course, is their deep dive articles after like managers leave or players leave, and I found that all very interesting. And one of the little details in that article was that they said they thought MLS might actually be the most likely destination. Now, there isn't any kind of solid reporting around that just yet. I think MLS teams have maybe been caught by surprise by how hastily this decision or this announcement has been made. But we've already seen links with San Diego in the past. We've seen Inter Miami, Chicago tentatively have been mentioned, and so I imagine those clubs will start to line up over the coming weeks and months. The team that I would like to see him play for on and off the field reasons, is NYCFC.
Yep.
Like they need to do something. They're getting out ambitioned by the Red Bulls at the moment, and like MLS HQ needs to prod City Football Group and say, "Come on, actually sign some good players." And you've got this nice do something. You've got this nice new stadium, and you need to sell tickets and season tickets. And so I think getting Salah to New York would be. That'd be what I'd like to see, rather than him going to the Saudi Pro League, which I know there has been long-standing interest in him. But the fact of the matter is, for me anyway, over here in the UK, it's just more difficult for me to watch those games, and I'm not quite ready to let go of Mohamed Salah. I know this season has been disappointing by his usual standards, but I think he's got plenty left in the tank if he just finds the right team.
Joe, what do you think? What is that right team?
Yeah, so I have a couple of Champions League suggestions just to go along with Trent's question. I think it's an interesting one because it made me think about, and we talked about this a little bit in the Discord recently, about how players of Salah's caliber don't tend to drop a level. They tend to drop like 3 levels at once. You know what I mean? Where you don't often see players doing a Kevin De Bruyne, right? He is a recent example that sort of flies in the face of what I'm saying. But where he's going from Manchester City to Napoli, from one of the elite clubs, like one of the 8 clubs on the planet that are sort of in that tier, to a team that's probably going to be in the Champions League from one year to the next, but you're not 100% sure and certainly aren't really a threat to win it. That's Napoli, right? There aren't a lot of guys who have done that. And so I sort of was wondering why that is the case. And we talked about it a little bit in the Discord, and this idea was raised that maybe a lot of these guys don't want to take a pay cut, and so they can still go and basically make insane money in MLS or in Saudi Arabia. And for a lot of these lower tier Champions League clubs, the finances matter a lot, right? If you're an Italian club, your finances matter a ton. If you're a basically non-PSG French club, your finances matter a ton. The Bundesliga clubs don't tend to make these kinds of moves in the first place for some of those reasons as well. And so then you're looking at Spain, and I think still in those situations outside of the big couple of teams, this all matters a lot. Barcelona sort of did this by going and getting Lewandowski from Bayern Munich, even though that's not dropping a level. It's another star moving to another club later in his career. But you just don't see a lot of those sorts of moves. So I think finances are probably a part of this. Maybe also the idea that reselling a player like Salah is not on the table, right? I mean, you're not going to get insane money for him for what you're going to invest. And if you actually do care about what your bottom line looks like, and some of these clubs don't, but some of them kind of have to. So I think that's probably why at the end of the day, we don't see a lot of these kinds of moves happening. So I think it's unlikely, Trent, to get to your question, that this is something that actually goes down. Like, I don't think we'll see Salah at another Champions League club. Is it possible? Of course it is, right? We literally just saw it happen with De Bruyne. But the list of moments that describe situations like this is very, very short. All that said, I do have 2 suggestions for Champions League level clubs for Salah, because obviously, selfishly, I would prefer to see him in MLS also. The first option, go to Napoli. Just do it. Just go follow De Bruyne. I think linking up with Kevin De Bruyne in Napoli would be awesome. I think Salah could play on the right side of their front 3, and he'd be really good. I think Graham's absolutely on the money there. I think he would still have something left in the tank for Napoli. I'm into that. My other option, and this is far less realistic even still.
Tottenham.
No, I
No?
know where Joe's going.
Oh, I don't think anybody knows where I'm going.
Is it
but
Serie A?
It is Serie A. Okay,
going
hold
Como?
on. Oh, no, I wasn't
Okay.
going Como. Como. Wow, I have to adjust to Como being a team that we can even sort of talk about.
Champions League places.
And that's a weird one, Taylor. I'll admit I wasn't prepared for that. Inter was my other option because they're my beloved, and I think there could be an evolution of Salah. And Graham, you mentioned San Diego sort of in passing, and he's not going to go to San Diego as far as I can tell. But I shouldn't say that with certainty. It seems unlikely to me that he ends up in San Diego. But I'm curious to see if Salah's later career evolution is going to be him playing as a 9. And Inter with their front 2 set up, I'm imagining him sort of rotating in and out with Lautaro Martinez. And it's one of those guys sort of starting every game. Horrible usage of like finances. That's a wretched idea from a squad build standpoint. But I think Salah could be really good in the front 2 as sort of the second forward who can drift to the right. He can come inside. I don't know if that's going to be where he ends up in the next few years, playing in that role rather than Inter Milan. But I do think he could be very, very good in that as he gets less mobile. That is something that I'm curious about, even if it's not going to happen probably in Italy.
So, Joe, when you envisage Salah in that, I think that's a really interesting thought experiment in that kind of number 9 position. Are you envisaging him as as a second forward, or could he play as a lone forward? Because if he can play as a lone forward, there's a certain Spanish/Catalonian club who almost certainly will be in the market for a new centre forward this summer, and who have a propensity for signing big name attackers, even if they maybe shouldn't. And so, yeah.
Yeah, Espanyol.
I wonder about
Espanyol?
that. Espanyol, yeah, that's right, yeah.
If I'm Barcelona, there's no chance I'm taking that risk on Salah playing a role that he really hasn't for a team that the expectation is to win the Champions League every season. That feels like a bridge too far when it comes to my personal level of risk tolerance. I think in the right team, it could work. I mean, we've seen Son and MLS adapt to playing a 9 role and doing it quite well over the last 6 months or so. I think Salah could do that even at a higher level because I think his profile is probably a bit of a better fit for that kind of role. We've also surely seen him play more centrally for Egypt at times, right? So it can't be a total new experience for him. But I was envisioning him more as the second forward, where he's got a bit more flexibility to drift wide to the right in particular, so that it's not a total shift from the role that he's played. But it would not shock me, Graham, if as he drops a level, if he moves more and more centrally.
Can I make another suggestion?
Oh, do it.
Another Spanish team. If that's the role that Salah's playing, and Atletico Madrid are losing Antoine Griezmann in the summer, and Atletico Madrid have new ambitious owners who want to signal the start of a new era with or without Diego Simeone, and we're going to be more exciting and more expansive, which, to give Atleti and Simeone their credit, over the last couple of months it's closer to actually happening than at any other time of Simeone's reign in charge. Atletico Madrid for Salah? I could potentially see it happening.
I thought about it because he's a guy that, again, I could conceptualize still playing on the right side for them, which could absolutely happen, or he could move in a bit more centrally for reasons that I've talked about already. At the same time, we should acknowledge Griezmann and Salah are very, very different players.
Course.
And I know that you know that, Graham, but it's not like a like-for-like thing by any means, but in a different interpretation of a role, I could sort of see it. I like it.
What I heard from all that was we all agree it's Como.
Yes. Actually, Taylor, that's an incredibly fun shout.
That's a pretty good shout.
It's a great shout.
They kind of moved away from that model, though, right? Like they're no longer signing Rafael Varane and the like.
It would seem not the best idea for Como, I would probably say, for some of the financial reasons that we mentioned already. But would I be entertained? You bet I would be.
Like, I don't have a good answer to this. My answer was NYCFC, which is what it was when last we discussed this, because I think it ticks a lot of boxes. I just don't have any idea what boxes he wants ticked, because I don't know if he wants to go to a Barcelona and, like, yeah, you're not going to be the main man, but you're playing with a bunch of world-class players, or like Bayern Munich. Do you go there and just be like, yeah, I'll be a squad player for a very good team that's going to win the title and I get more silverware? Like, maybe. Do you want to go to a place where you are the man and the name, and maybe that still is a Champions League club, maybe it's not, but you get all of the billing? Do you want to go somewhere where there's like an established manager if you haven't enjoyed your time with Arne Slot? Do you want to go somewhere where there is a Klopp-esque figure who kind of like is in charge and you can rely on? Like, is family a part of this? Does he just want to move somewhere where he can settle his family and be stable? How big of an issue is money? Does he want a ton of money? Does Saudi Arabia appeal for that reason? Or maybe MLS? Or is it more about sort of going and playing football that he enjoys, or is it winning silverware? I just don't really have any answers, because it seems like all of those have been priorities at different points for him. My gut is that he's not enjoying the kind of change at Liverpool, combined with feeling like maybe he's not being like as beloved by ownership and the like management team as he feels like he should be, and as would be justified with what he's done for that club. So maybe he wants somewhere where he will kind of feel that love while still playing at a high level. I just don't really have a good read on what exactly his priorities are. I saw somebody from the Egyptian FA saying that if he goes to MLS, it will hurt his national team prospects. I don't know how much he will care about that after this World Cup. Who knows? So I don't know. I think it's just there are many different factors, and I don't feel like I have a good answer as to where all of those factors come together to have Mohamed Salah playing next season.
Is that the Egyptian FA who's almost entirely all their national team players play in Egypt, right? That's the same Egyptian FA we're talking about?
I think that's the one.
Yeah, sure.
Ali, it is.
There we go, yeah. Yes. We look forward to that Saudi move being announced very shortly.
No, not that one, the other one.
Got it. There's two. Yeah, good
No,
point.
there's more than two. There's a million.
If only someone had a newsletter where they discuss such things. We'll never know. Trent Magivas, thank you very much indeed for that question. We take one more quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about why Paris is so hot right now. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. David from Tampa has got this one. He's got a monkey's paw situation, as described by David from Tampa. Would you trade the American soccer landscape for the Italian one? Ooh, mamma mia. MLS becomes a top 5 league, and the US becomes a top national team that wins the Copa America once or twice, but the USA has essentially no World Cup presence for 2 decades. Pew, pew, pew. What do we think, Joe? How do we like this as a monkey's paw situation? Can you see yourself trading for the Italian landscape and sitting in those crumbling stadiums, eating terrible stadium food?
Genuine question, Ryan, is what's the Italian stadium food situation? Is it better than what we've got? Is it
I would have
worse?
thought it'd be quite good, sure.
Yeah, me too. What's up with that?
In my experience, it's not good because people don't eat it, because there are legitimate gentlemen who suggest they eat elsewhere.
Yeah, that whole situation.
Yeah.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. On this question, I think if you strip out the potential for like what could come in the future, it's a lot easier for me to happily take this swap. Because if the equation is just a snapshot of the two leagues right now and the two men's national teams right now, I would take it. I mean, I think Italy's domestic league is stronger right now, no doubt about it, than MLS is. And the Italian national team is better right now than MLS is. So especially if I don't have to go back and live through the pain of missing multiple World Cups. Like, I mean, the U.S. already missed a World Cup, so I've already felt that pain. How much more can it hurt to like have memories of doing it again? I don't know. But I think it becomes pretty...
I know how much more it can hurt.
Yeah.
Missing multiple World Cups.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's a bit different, Graham, is it not? I mean,
yeah, because we're
and all
rubbish.
that. Yeah, right. Either way, you said it, not me. I do think if you take this trade, a stronger domestic league could eventually lead to a stronger national team. So I would kind of take that from a U.S. perspective as well. And especially with an expanded World Cup, Italy's probably going to most of these from now on. Not all of them. Like UEFA is still an absolute just devastating area to have to qualify from because of how deep it is. But Italy's probably going to be at most of these tournaments. I think we would all end up kind of agreeing on that. Now, a couple of caveats I'm going to make to this because in general, I think I like this swap. If you add in women's national teams, I'm out. U.S. women's national team is way too valuable of a property when you come to think about like who's tipping the scales on these things. Ain't no way. 0% chance am I doing this deal if the women's national teams are involved. The U.S. women's national team is one of the only American soccer things that truly brings me joy to actually watch. Not just to like think about and wonder how it could get better, no, but to actually watch now. They're amazing and are stacked and will continue to be amazing and continue to be stacked. And I don't want to see that fall through my fingers. And then the other thing here, and I want to get the room's temperature on this because this is the thing I'm least sure about. If you add in the potential that I feel like MLS has and that we would all probably recognize MLS has, are you still taking this deal? Am I taking this deal? I kind of don't want to anymore. Is that crazy that if you add in the potential for growth, I'm just thinking about, Ryan, you said crumbling stadiums. And that's kind of what it is, right? You look at these facilities in Major League Soccer, and there's a lot to like about kind of what's being built here. A lot of frustration points as well, both about how the American soccer landscape is constructed, how things don't flow together. We talked about USL a whole bunch and all the messes there. MLS has their own messes, right? But I kind of feel like the financial might that MLS has and the potential for growth in an untapped sort of parts of an untapped soccer nation, other parts are tapped, might be stronger than Italy. And in that way, I'm a bit hesitant. Taylor, you're nodding, which makes you think you agree with me.
Yeah, I wouldn't take this straight up. I think the U.S. women's point is a great one, Joe, one that I had not considered. I care about the U.S. being at the World Cup more than I care about many other things in soccer. And I don't ever want to not be at a World Cup again. It was not fun to miss it. It was not fun to not have the U.S. there. And to have that happen 2 times in 3 tournaments and then one of the performances at that tournament being pretty abysmal, it would just be a bummer. I would like the U.S. to be somewhat relevant at the World Cup. But I also, like I said it before this season, like I'm really enjoying Major League Soccer for what it is, but also like because of what it is. I like that it's more open. I like that you get different philosophies and you like it's annoying at times that some games just kind of seem not to matter. But at the same time, when you have the freedom without relegation to be able to kind of experiment and find your formula so that you hit the playoffs in stride, or you figured some things out as the season goes, or you figured out how to use your young players. Like, I like Pro-Rel, and I'm excited to see what USL can do, theoretically. But
Maybe
at the same time, like,
sometime,
we'll see. But I just like Major League Soccer right now for getting different teams with different philosophies that are sometimes going to be way too open and sometimes are going to be really compact, and you don't really know what you're going to get on a given day. There is an unpredictability to MLS that I think other leagues just cannot afford and do not abide. And I think that often leads to just less fun domestic campaigns. I think a lot of that is just that I find myself less and less interested with some of the leagues right now that are just like money, money, money. That's all that matters. Sign the big player, get the big player in. If they're not performing, get another big player in, but also play kind of like reserved, controlled soccer at all costs so we don't ever have any vulnerabilities. It just feels really robotic at times, and MLS feels anything but robotic, at least on the pitch. So I like MLS for what it is, and I want the U.S. at World Cups on both the men's and women's side. So I'm sticking with what we got for now.
All right. Graham, where'd you land?
So, Taylor, does your opinion change if surely we're factoring in, if we take this, the US beyond this barren period is going to be a contender to win the World Cup, right? If it has a top 5 league. That's what this question is saying, right? After this period is over.
Right now?
That they're a contender. No, but out of the four of the big five leagues, England's the only one that hasn't won the World Cup in the last 20 years. Spain, Italy, Germany, France have all done it. So like it stands to reason if you have a top five league, you are going to be, broadly speaking, going to be a World Cup contender.
You've got 8% chance.
Yeah, excusing England from this equation.
Way to defy the odds, England. You know,
Yeah,
that's
well
just
done.
Special.
Congratulations.
Lucky underdogs.
Give
So
it a few
like,
weeks.
how long has Italy been? 2014. So let's say they don't make this one. So we're recording before the outcome of theirs. Probably I'm giving the game away here. So let's say they aren't at this one. That's what, 12 years without a. Would you take 12 years without a World Cup? But after those 12 years, the US is a
100%
contender?
I would,
Absolutely
without even thinking about it.
Nope.
Like it takes. I see. I think that's so interesting, Taylor, about how we process things differently. Like, it is special to see your country at the World Cup. I think, right, and that's where we absolutely agree. I don't think there's
is the
much
best thing in
disagreement
soccer.
about that. It is.
Period.
It's not for me. The best thing in
There you
soccer
go.
is actually being good. Like I would do a lot of things for the U.S. to be a team that we didn't have to like ponder. Oh, are they going to reach the round of
What'd you do,
16
Joe?
this time?
But
I don't care to say, frankly.
I don't want to interrupt. I'll make my point after you.
No, I'm through. Basically, I just think that's not to criticize how you're thinking about this at all. We just think about this in different ways,
But
which
you
I
all
think
are
is interesting.
you all are creating a scenario that doesn't exist. Like I think that's the
Well,
thing.
the
Like,
question is-
the question itself is the
We
US
don't
is
actually have a
essentially-
monkey paw.
Well, no, but the question is the U.S. essentially has no World Cup presence for 2 decades, and you all are then saying, yeah, but afterwards they are guaranteed to be there. And I'm saying, are we saying that about Italy? Is that where Italy are at present? Like, no. So, you all are making this addition at the end that, like, yeah, if you guarantee me we're going to win 3 World Cups after not going to the World Cup 3 times, maybe that changes it. But we don't have that. Like, there is no.
No, it's not guaranteed. But
Right.
surely the percentages are greater that not only will you make a World Cup, you'll be quite good at a World Cup if you have a top league.
Unless
Just
you're
because. No, but England could win this World Cup. Like they are one of the contenders to win a World Cup this summer, and they were at the last couple of World Cups as well. Like they made a semi-finals and quarter-finals. So
I would just take the trade, Taylor. Maybe this is a slight deviation of the question. I would just take the trade of your odds of making it to the World Cup are lower, but if you make it, your odds of actually doing something notable are higher. I would make that trade. Maybe that's a bad trade. Maybe I'd feel differently if I actually lived it. But it'd be kind of nice if the U.S. made it to a World Cup and we actually thought they might kind of be able to win it or make a deep run. And I don't think that's ever been true,
Yeah, I mean, maybe, truly, maybe it will change after this World Cup if it is another tournament of like, yep, they did exactly what we thought they would do.
It probably
nothing more,
will be.
nothing less. That's a little dull. But having missed 2018 and having not been to a World Cup for 40 years until 1990, like it's still progress is good, I guess. And maybe you all are right that like switching that, making it a top 5 league guarantees more progress. My assumption, though, is that if you're just switching them and making it a top 5 league, that means you have a lot more non-Americans playing in it to make it that level of quality. So then you go the England route of like, has that helped England with the Premier League being like the most international league in the world? I don't know. Probably not.
I think in some ways, Taylor, to me, this question is trading an ascending soccer program for one that's got decades and decades and decades of experience. I think there's a lot of value in that. You look at that for Belgium and the US in that friendly last weekend,
I prefer not to.
where one team's sort of ascending. With all due respect, the US hasn't been playing at that level for as long as a lot of these European teams, right? Certainly not Italy. So what you get with that, you get a level of experience, you get the chip goes off the shoulder a little bit more than it would when you're in sort of an ascending program like the US is. And I think there's a lot of value in being a program that's had a century of soccer behind it and a century of winning World Cups behind it and more experience to the game. I think that delivers a lot to me.
We beat you in 1950. That is my response to that.
you've got
75
legacy interest, right? Like you would presume if the US has a top 5 league in the world, there's more like grassroots interest, I guess. Like just because there is with the top 5 leagues right now. And I hear what you're saying about Italy, Taylor. But one of my pushbacks on that is you look at the Italy team now, and it is a little bit of a quirk that they haven't qualified for recent World Cups. Like that team is still on the face of it. Maybe they're not a better team than the US right
They did
now,
win a
'cause
Euros in 21.
They did win a Euros in 2021, and like you look through their team, they've got one of the best centre backs in the world. They've got one of the best goalkeepers in the world. They have for my money, one of the best midfield units in international soccer. Like, it's a bit of an anomaly that they have missed like 2 World Cups. So I still think like having a top 5 league is going to be something. It's very difficult for a national team program to propel itself forward in like a meaningful way. If you think of countries that have done it over recent decades, you could probably count them on like one hand. I think having a top 5 league is one of those things that would give you a good chance of making that big leap forward. So I actually haven't answered this question. I don't really know, because I kind of can see Taylor's point of view as well as a Scotland fan who did go like 20 years without a World Cup. But I can also see where Joe's coming from, and I agree with him that it gives you a better chance of actually doing something at the World Cup. I would agree with that.
Don't worry, because I'm going to just open this up even more. Because I also think my lack of enthusiasm for that idea is also rooted in like the issues in American soccer, especially at youth level, are as prevalent as they have ever been in terms of players falling through the cracks, in terms of the lack of catchment areas across the board, the ability to kind of like court from communities that aren't always represented. And I think that's probably only getting worse. And so if you make MLS now a top 5 league where it's just like these teams are codified as being in this league and that's how it is, I'm not sure that really incentivizes better competition or better ways of dealing with an existing problem. I think like the US, just the size of the country fundamentally gives me a headache when it comes to figuring out how a domestic league and domestic soccer can really function in an efficient and effective way. Maybe it cannot. But so I think if you're then making it striving to be a top 5 league, which is also just a kind of a nonsense thing. It's similar to a golden generation in my mind of like according to what metric and by whom and when. I just think you could end up chasing the wrong thing depending on what you think soccer is supposed to be. And now I'm just fully going into my hippie identity. So there you go.
Maybe. But what if I told you the Monkey's Paw took care of all of that? You just became a top 5 league and everything was great.
I think what I've learned from the monkey ball situation is that it never works like that, and there are always unintended consequences, and you are always inevitably hoisted by your own petard or captain.
What happened to the rest of the monkey? Has anybody asked that question yet?
Exactly. That's my
concerning.
point.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's ever happened in any kind of law, Taylor. We'll see. The monkey's paw is a fail. Never fails. David from Tampa, thank you very much indeed for your question there. One more for this episode from Thomas Buck. You could say the buck stops here. I've been following Le Bleu all my life, but I don't understand. What I don't understand now is how the Paris region became such a hotbed for youth talent. Beyond the French national team, I'm pretty sure it's the region that produced the single greatest number of players in the last few World Cups. What's in the water that the footballing youth are drinking there? Now, of course, Taylor, we've got your
wine.
Mbappes. Yeah, it's wine. It's sour grapes that's in the water. I think it's the short answer there. But Thierry Henry, Anelka, Benzema, Mbappe. The list is extremely long of players who've come from Paris. And I suppose Clairefontaine. Maybe we'll have a discussion about that. Sort of the French school of excellence, or whatever we want to call it, where the national team is based just outside of Paris as well. It is definitely a hotbed, and it's interesting that so many absolutely incredible players have come from that region when you wouldn't even say that Ligue 1 is one of the top leagues, to come back to that argument as well.
How long do you want me to go on this one?
3 minutes.
I'll do my best.
Very
okay,
specific.
so I did a little bit of reading about like the demographics of Paris and the surrounding environment just to see how it's like shifted. And essentially since the early 2000s, from what I read, immigration and development have basically shifted the Parisian landscape. You have poorer communities pushed out of the city center, largely due to gentrification, and into the kind of suburbs surrounding environs. Immigration patterns also shifting along those lines. You still have like a good percentage of immigrants settling in Paris, but I think it's dropped from 30% of the population to 20% of the population, but in the kind of metro Paris area, those numbers are massively increased. And then at the same time, the number of the population in like Paris city center that claim an immigrant parent is still around 50%. So you still have lots of immigration into Paris, even more immigration into the area around Paris. And with that immigration, you're getting still a very mixed like immigrant community. I think some areas claim to have like 130 different nationalities represented in just one small area. But it means you have a dense population with immigrant backgrounds that are looking for outlets, and a lot of them, like on the sporting side of things, can be on the kind of like small pitches that dot the landscape. So you get smaller pitches with a lot of people wanting to play, which means an emphasis on like technical ability, lots of touches, like explosive speed versus big tackles and big crosses and things along those lines. But you also still then have this idea that soccer is the way out, kind of similar to how I think like communities in the United States see the NBA and the NFL. Soccer is that. That's what Paul Pogba has talked about pretty openly. And so you get parents at a younger age, or parents with kids at a younger age, really focusing on training them and getting them ready to excel at a young age so that they can then make it to Clairefontaine, which you mentioned, Ryan. So you have just like a larger population that are all trying to have like football be the way out. And it benefits because if it's not Clairefontaine, where they're sending their most elite of their elite, you're having other clubs in the area that kind of fill in the gaps, develop players at a younger age, and then move them on to slightly more established clubs that then move them on to much more established clubs in Ligue 1. But Clairefontaine itself, to give a little bit of background there, the academy there is dedicated to developing players from the age of like 13 to 15, primarily. All costs are covered, and you're basically bringing in the most capable players to develop in all technical aspects of the game so that they can play in different systems. It's not just teaching them to play one thing one way, one style one way. Only 22 to 23 players are selected each year, and as you mentioned, Ryan, you've got Henry, you've got Anelka, Mbappe, Kimpembe, Matuidi all attended. Anthony Martial and N'Golo Kante were rejected for not being sufficiently talented, so maybe that tells you how competitive it is. So you just have a huge number of people playing football from different communities, different backgrounds, and a lot of them then, if they don't end up playing for France or don't make it to the top level, end up playing for their nationalities of their parents or the countries of their parents. And so that's where you have Algeria, Senegal, Morocco, Tunisia, Ivory Coast, to name just a few, all benefiting from players born in that area then going and playing for their national team because it's exposure and it's an opportunity to play international soccer and represent the nation of your parents, your grandparents, or what have you. So it just kind of becomes that sustaining cycle of the area continuing to develop players that then help develop more players.
Very good. Graham, anything about that?
What Taylor said. I mean, that's
I know, it's quite comprehensive.
a comprehensive outline there. The only thing I would add, and Taylor may have mentioned it and I missed it, but you have like a real street soccer culture that I think also exists in London as well. Like South London is very like, we've all seen them, you know, those kind of like cages that double as I guess like basketball courts, and they'll just play soccer there like all day and night in London and in Paris. And obviously that is maybe like a consequence of the poverty that these communities will experience, where maybe organised soccer is not as prevalent, so they just go and pick up a ball and play in these cages, and that obviously then leads to lots of touches of the ball and very it's improving your technical ability and your work in tight spaces. It's also very expressive, and so you get talented soccer from players who grow up playing that kind of street soccer.
Yeah, and even when it is street soccer, it's still like players ending up kind of in the system, because this is the stat that blew my mind. You have more registered footballers in Paris and kind of like Metro Paris than in the entire nation of Belgium.
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah, that's
They're doing all right.
Whew. So what you're saying, Taylor, is that those registered players of Paris would beat the US 10-4? That's what
Double them up. Why not? No, I think the only things that I'll add to this as well, I think you have the fact that France have actually been good at this international level. That probably matters a little bit, where you get some feedback loop happening here, where you see people like you winning stuff, and that sort of sparks more interest and success and all those sorts of things, where you can have kids then seeing people that look like them and have similar experiences to them succeeding, and that they can do that too. And then there's a very real, I think, professional aspect of all this as well, where if you think about Ligue 1, there's not good money in Ligue 1. I mean, there's good money for players to be making money. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. The Ligue 1 clubs outside of PSG cannot compete with what these other teams in the real levels of Europe are spending. And so what do you do when you don't have money? Well, what did Barcelona do when they didn't have money? They looked back at the academy, and now look at where they are. They're developing just as good of talents as they ever have, basically. I mean, effectively. And their team's really good again. So Liga clubs have done the same thing, but really for even longer now, where they are almost forced to develop young players because they don't have the money to seriously go out and pay for all these other players to come in and get their minutes instead. And so you have not just one of the largest cities in the Western sort of world, but you don't just have a ton of footballing influence and cultures coming together in that city. You don't just have the structure and the infrastructure and the desire to play the game, and that soccer is the most popular sport in your country. And you don't just have success that kids get to see it and can think that they can do it too at the international level. You also have the means of, once that gigantic population of soccer players has come through and sort of been filtered in, the ones who aren't going to make it and the ones who are. Okay, the ones who are in the professional environment and they're actually having a chance to play. And that's something that you don't see all the way across the world, is those factors coming together. I think it's a lot of little things. I think we've hit on probably most of them. And you smush those things into one giant soccer apparatus, and you have the deepest, most talented national team pool that maybe we've ever seen.
There we go. Trivia. Thank you very much, Thomas Buck, for your question. Thank you to everybody who submitted a question for this episode. Hey, if you'd like to do so, you can go to TotalSoccerShow.com/questions, or you can join our Patreon, patreon.com/TotalSoccerShow. That gives you access to our Discord, where you can ask away, you can chat with us, and our TSS community. Thank you very much to everybody who supports us via that medium. Hey, Taylor Rockwell, we did it. We listened to questions. We got there. Thank you very much.
We did it. Thank you all very much, except to Joe and Graham, who hate the U.S. being at the World Cup, is my takeaway from this episode.
Yeah. I famously show it by not buying any of their jerseys or the merch. That's how
Said the
I
guy
show.
wearing the Jamaica shirt.
Thank you, Graham, for all you do.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
And thank you very much, Joe Lowery.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks again, listener, for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye.